You've been hearing all kinds of things, and we all come from different walks of life. So I want to start off with a couple concepts and to talk a little bit to get us on the same wavelength. First, I want to talk about and recognize with you that every dollar we spend has an effect. Every single transaction we make has an effect locally and abroad. It's hard to measure, it's hard to define, sometimes small, sometimes large, but it has an effect. And it's a slightly different concept that I'll explain, it'll tie in. We do not live in a world of absolutes. So this is kind of complicated, but I want to explain what I mean by that. I don't believe that any one single action, no matter how small or large, will lead us to fail or save the earth in the short term or on its own. There is no one absolute action. So keep these two loose concepts half-formed in your brain, and we're going to change locations. We're going to go somewhere just slightly warmer, slightly prettier. I want to picture yourself in a kayak on a lake, and it's a beautiful day, it's warm out. You can smell the trees, you can hear the birds, the water's calm. Now, I don't know what you're doing on that lake, in that kayak, but that doesn't matter. And now that you're there, you may want to stay there, but that doesn't matter either. Because we need to assume that you need to be at a destination. And here I want to pause and let's recognize a couple things. One draw of your paddle, one stroke, is not going to get you to whatever destination you need to be at. And for those of you who don't kayak, let me assure you there is nobody strong or skilled enough to get to the other side of the lake with one stroke of the paddle. But on the flip side, let's also recognize that you are never going to get to whatever destination you want to get at unless you paddle again and again and again with intention and understanding what the effect is of every action you take. So if you internalize all those things and you think that every action, no matter how small, has an effect, that it's not one single action that is going to make meaningful, significant change in the short term, and also that really I need to understand the effects of all the actions I take to reach any kind of meaningful destination or change. Now, I would love this to be a conversation back and forth, but I'm going to need to make the assumption first that everybody here wants their family, their economy, their community to be better than it is today. I know it's a difficult assumption to make. That everybody here wants a healthier economy, a more vibrant place to live, culturally and economically. Now, making that kind of decision, which I hope for all of you is articulating something that you already held dear to yourself and that you understood, but making that kind of decision, making that a goal or making that a destination is almost like, you've just had a child and you've decided that I'm going to pay for their university. I'm going to give them an education. Maybe it's the education you never had growing up. That's a huge goal. And when you have that kind of long-term goal, you make decisions differently for a long time. When that child is 10 years old, you may decide to go on a big family vacation or buy a new family vehicle, but you take that 2 to 5 seconds and you say, what about the college fund? How do I need to adjust things? And you're only making those small considerations because you have articulated a long-term, important, huge, big, audacious goal down the road. Now, these kinds of goals don't happen overnight, as anybody who has accomplished them can tell you. But hey, recycling last week, that's not going to save the planet next week. Me eating a salad last night is not going to give me any kind of six-pack for summer. And tying this all back in as we get to the actual topic, buying local today and in the coming weeks isn't going to improve our economy, better the quality of our lives, and generally build a stronger community right away. But it's an intentioned and effective, and it has an effect, action in the right direction, a paddle towards the destination we want to go to. Okay, I think that we're on a similar page here. We're all on the wavelength. We're talking in the right direction. I want to talk about my destination. I want to talk about where I want to be at the end of my excursion on this lake. I live in New Brunswick, Canada, as do most, if not all of you. And in Canada, we refer to provinces as have provinces and have not provinces. And New Brunswick has self-labeled as a have not province for a long time. And contrary to what you think I'm probably going to say, I'm not as concerned with becoming a have province as with becoming a want to live in province. And I don't actually believe that that's the same thing. Of course, I want a stronger, more vibrant economy in my region, but I think that's an important and necessary first step. And I challenge myself often, and I'm challenging you now to raise the bar and to be a little bit more comprehensive when you envision what you want your region and community to be in the future, and to incorporate more than just economic health. Now, I have been working for 6 years in building relationships between those that produce food and those that eat food in our region. And I can tell you, or I believe, that buying local, when you can, when it makes sense, with intention, will have a huge impact. I also believe it's one of the single most important things you can do to make the place that you live in a better place to be, both culturally and economically. I want to talk quickly about the economics. We today live in a smaller world than has ever existed. You can reach out to somebody anywhere in the world in moments. You can buy anything from anywhere in minutes. Traditional economics would often lead you to think that we need to support the most productive or the lowest cost provider of any good or service. That as a species, to be more productive, to become more efficient, to advance, that we need to support the most efficient process, that we need to maximize importation, exportation, that we need to outsource whenever it's possible to lower the cost. But if we articulate where we want to be with more than just economic numbers, are we sure that that's really leading us where we go? Some people would often say that to feed and to clothe and to give minimum living standards to the world's population, we'll have to run that type of race. But when I hear that language without the greater context of where we want to go and how that's going to help us reach our goal, I often think of that maybe it's us improving at paddling, that it's us paddling faster, more strokes per minute, more kilometers per hour. We're getting better. We're using our efforts less. But then you aren't saying to anybody that you're actually going in a circle. Maybe we're not actually going anywhere when it's related to where we want to be. I want to talk about, and it's a fairly innocent case of how concentrating on being more productive and more efficient and taking the best prices, and that's the way the economy works, has affected our region here in New Brunswick. Did you know that in 1973 or 4, we're talking 2 generations ago, 97% of the food that the citizens of New Brunswick ate was produced by the citizens of New Brunswick. Today, it's less than 5%. So when you think about that, that's 2 generations. It's more than 90% of the food that we eat is no longer produced in our region. But this isn't anybody to blame. I'm not railing against supermarkets or systems. I'm not that kind of person. What has happened, and we've looked at this through spectation and talking to people and over a long time of research, is that we were underdeveloped. And when systems happened, we lost our systems and were replaced by larger distribution. I had the privilege of living in Belgium, in Germany, in Luxembourg. And when I go to a food distributor there as a chef, or I went to the supermarket, the food I was going to get was as likely to be from kilometers away as it was from continents away. But imagine supermarkets, large international distribution systems, and huge worldwide corporations that are now running our supermarkets and companies like that. When they happened and they really took over that type of sales, they came to Europe and it had hundreds, if not thousands of years of history. Literally, some of the farms have been there for thousands of years. Food depots, distribution systems, business arrangements, stores. They didn't have to come in and create anything. They came in and adopted the systems that were in place. And they came to our lightly populated area of the world, and in a lot of people's words, less sophisticated. And they found a lot of meaningful, but a lot of smaller arrangements and handshakes and business done by many, many people in many, many ways. And it was easier for them to come in and implant a huge distribution system that pretty much wiped out what we produce in the region and how it gets to the people who eat in the region. But as you can see, that this is a relatively new phenomenon. We're not talking even more than 3 or 4 decades that this has radically changed. And it's not just in food, although that's my wheel space and how I want to talk about it, but in all different areas of how you buy stuff, it's now easier for you to go to a website or you to go to a large supermarket like Walmart or what have you. And it's easier. It's not always cheaper, but it's always easier. And there's negative effects of this now that it's out of balance. I'm not saying we were ever fully sufficient. I'm not saying that 50 years ago we bought everything locally, but there was a balance. There was a two-way street. At one point, 30, 40, 50 years ago, it was easier for you to buy a lot of things locally. You would never import carrots because you can provide those in New Brunswick every single day of the year, 365, and often more cost-effective. I want to talk about a different concept on economics before I switch away. And I want to talk about seeing money as blood in a system. And it needs to move and circulate around the entire system to keep it healthy and growing and vibrant. And when you buy things, keeping this in mind, when you buy things that we produce here naturally, competitively, in season, at a place like a supermarket that isn't supplying local, or if you go to your website, it is creating an open wound in our economic system. I want you to picture it. You've worked a really hard week. You're taking your paycheck home. You go to your favorite big box store. You go to your favorite website. You're buying the things that you and your family need, or let's be honest, want. And poof, a good large chunk of the dollars you just spent have left our region forever. Now, many of these companies do pay local wages. Well, actually, all of them, by law, pay local wages. And they often contribute to charity or to community. And sometimes they may even sell a product here. But for the hugest part, the profits of that company don't come here. The shareholder returns do not come here. The highest wages in that entire company are almost never here. And often you don't see any of our or local regional marketing companies use, engineering, consulting, accountants, professional services, construction companies even. It's bleeding what could be circulating in our system. Now, buying local, I'm not saying buying local today is going to make a huge difference and it's going to turn everything around. And like I said, I don't believe we live in a world of absolutes. I don't believe any one plan, strategy, or action is going to change everything meaningfully in the short term on its own. But think of this. Many of you have decided that you want to save the environment. Huge goal. Big, hairy, audacious goal. And you are often reading labels differently, purchasing differently. You're probably paying more for greener products. You're probably taking time out of your busy schedule and you're recycling, you're rinsing out cans, you're removing caps to your bottles, and so on, and so on, and so on. So is it so unrealistic to think that if we make internally and articulate to ourselves and to our family that we want to see a better economic region, that we couldn't start taking some daily small decisions, some consideration in our daily acts? And frankly, and this is one of my favorite parts, it's not all about the dollars and cents. On a cultural note, when we grow, make, or do things in this region that is unique to this region, that is a reason why people visit. Whether it be local food, or beer, or art, or new businesses, or stories alone. A great community is that has preserved its identity. And local business owners understand that they need to preserve the identity of our region because they understand that that's why locals stay. And they understand that's why newcomers come. I have never heard anybody say, I'd really love to move to that region because they have one of the prettiest Walmarts I've ever been in. I've never heard anybody say, it's like, I want to move to that region because all the stuff I can buy and do here, I can do it there too. If you want to live in a place that has a unique tourism-inspiring business, you need to support it, period. The point is not that I think you need to go to self-sufficiency, that you need to start buying everything local, that you need to sacrifice your comforts at home to pay more to buy local. All I'm saying is that you need to articulate that I want to improve the place I live in and consider every time you make a small decision, is there a way I can make this decision more impactful towards my goal? And I think you'll be surprised by the fact that it's not always more expensive. And more importantly, what I'm hoping is that sometimes you'll find out that there are qualities to a product or service that you value more than just quantity for dollar. I want you to understand the consequences. Make your articulated goal. Right now, I want to add to that idea. Let's have an imagine moment. Go back to you getting that paycheck at the end of a week of hard work. And you open the envelope and you're checking the total. Now pause, look over, look at the other column. It's called deductions. We all pay considerable tax dollars. This is a huge opportunity for growing the circulation through our system. Imagine that if all of those dollars were spent thinking about a more comprehensive goal of where we want our economy to be, aside from just dollars. And each action was looked at on how can we spend it better or more effective given our goals. And I want to stress that I think that you should only do that when it's possible, when it's competitive, when it makes sense. And that's really hard to define, and that's a whole other TED Talk. But it's the beginning of a discussion. If you start asking those questions, things will happen right away. But I struggle with thinking that we couldn't be competitive in offering to any government-subsidized contract or event or department anything they need in the way of marketing, logo design, engineering, professional services. And I really know that every single time a government dollar has been put forward and is buying an apple, that New Brunswick could supply it at a competitive and lower price. But unfortunately, we have outsourced our decision on where we purchase our food to international large corporations that use a different distribution system and can't use ours, or rarely does. Now, when I get to this point, I often feel like I'm ranting. But what I have done is I have made a conscious choice that I want to, the place that I live in, I want it to be a place that everybody's lining up to be a part of. And when you make a point of realizing that you are part of the ecosystem, that you are always going to be both the problem and the solution forever, I have a hard time being complacent. Now, I'm hoping that we're all looking at the same destination. In fact, I'm just going to go ahead and assume, like we did at the beginning, that everybody's going in the right direction. But what I'm really excited about, and what I tend to not share with everybody because I don't want to talk too utopian, too idealistic, but if I have a destination of better, and I'm using all my strength, and I'm paddling, and I'm making the effects in the right direction as much as I possibly can, and all of you have a similar vision of better, and you're doing your own actions, you're thinking about it in your own way, the only thing that can happen is that the destination we're going towards is going to surpass the thing that we're envisioning tenfold, more than we can ever imagine. If everybody's shooting for the same goal, it'll be better. Thank you.